Hey everyone, Sycra here, and today I'm streaming with the usual suspects, Bob, Meatbag, Flavia, Sam, and Decru. And we're just working on this image of, I don't know, it's like, there's a comic. Oh, it's kind of off screen. Let's see if I can like move this. Okay. You can kind of move it. And it's like a marmot meeting, I guess, and then I guess they got in a fight. But I guess we should make a new one for this stream. Zoom out. Ooh, there we go. All right. So just. Ooh. Guess just make it invisible and then make a new layer. Cool. Alright, so let's see if we have any questions. Enormity asks, do you have any animated projects? Are you working in an industry? If so, which? And how do we get in one? I personally do not. Not doing animation, nor do I work in the animation industry. I don't think anyone else here is, so I don't think we can answer that. Josica says, what era in history of art was your favorite? And maybe you would like to live in it if you could. Mine is Renaissance. Question for everybody. That's a great question. Okay. I guess for myself it would be, I guess, late 19th century. Art, when there was like Sargent, Bouguereau, stuff like that. Or now, I guess now is pretty interesting. There's a lot of stuff I don't like about it, but because there's like a shallowness to art right now that I'm not a huge fan of. But there's so much mixing, so much like interesting stuff happening. So what do you guys think?
Yeah, I probably pick right now as well. Like you, I'm not a fan of how, I don't know, basically like you said, shallowness in art. I'm not finding that there's a lot of depth. But
Mm-hmm.
just as an artist myself, I have a lot of access to tools. There's a lot of things I can do, and I can basically be a one-man show. Whereas it feels as though in the past, maybe you need to rely more on people.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. Like with the 19th century, it's like, okay, but you're basically limited by the institutions present.
Mm-hmm.
And then also, like, you're basically painting from reference, like all the time. Get a
Yeah,
model, set them up. Or,
it's more fine art, right?
yeah.
Uh,
And then anime wasn't a thing yet, so you can't really
yeah.
draw in those styles. Um, but in terms of aesthetics, I would say late 19th century. What about you, Flavia?
Yeah, I think it would be probably 19th century. I don't know if late, maybe because I guess so, because that was going into the Gilded Age. Yeah, it would be the same. I don't have the altar of the maybe nowadays, because I don't know. I feel like I could do with more of a sticks and stones approach in exchange for the quiet. I feel like nowadays, even compared to like 20 years ago, is very noisy for me. It's very noisy for my brain. People are like exposed to a lot more chatter than they used to be. So before you would have to venture out and seek it out and stuff, and you'd have to go to the bars or go to the market or go meet friends or acquaintances to hear chatter, and there was this barrier which served as a filter, and I prefer that. So yeah, 19th century is
And
the
what about you,
sweet spot.
Decru? Is Decru
Oh,
around?
might be.
Or did he have to go deal with his emergencies again? What about you,
Well,
Sam?
Yeah, for me it's the art today, I guess, because I'm doing digital art myself, and that's all I know. All the traditional stuff is way too slow for me. So I'm interested in what I am doing. So today for me.
Yeah, I was thinking about how there was a period in the early 2000s or late 90s when there was um, everything was sort of expanding, but you had forums. Like it was a little different because right now, a lot of the places, like you can find communities on Discord and things like that, but a lot of the places we used to have that artists would get together and meet each other, post work, get critiques from like these huge audiences, they're gone. What we have now are like places to post your work and promote yourself, but not really for people to help each other out, where it would just be like different skill levels, and you would have like the pros who are super good posting their work and it would be really inspiring, but then you'd also have people just starting out who are getting advice and learning and growing, and there it felt like there was more camaraderie. Now it feels like everything's competitive. Yeah, that's how I feel. Because when I started with the forums, it's just very different. It was like, oh, here's communities, and then we would have meetups like with conceptart.org. Flavia, I think you went to one, right? Was it a conceptart.org related thing?
Yeah, it was like an online workshop. I guess they're very.
No. In person
Oh,
one.
you no, that was part of a Comic Con. Like they had
okay.
a few people. They had a few people, but that were connected, but they were just invited independently.
Yeah.
What makes you think? What do you think happened that made it so that everything's like more competitive and less community based?
Social media. I think it changed the thing, because what would happen is that we were, because you're around the same period roughly as I was, at least some of it there's overlap, where it used to be like, oh, okay, you go on the forum to post your work, and then sometimes like especially on conceptart.org, there would be art directors sort of looking through and finding people and then maybe offering jobs or something. And then you'd have places to post like DeviantArt, but they were very art focused. And then it turned, I remember, I think the first one was Instagram, where everyone was like, you have to post on Instagram, or was it Tumblr? It might have been Tumblr. But it was like, this is not specifically for art. This is like a bigger thing, and now you're caring about views. And it started turning into more of a like a views based thing. And then we had Patreon taking off as well, where it started becoming more about the artist and not the community. It was like, well, it's not I think it was really Sakimi-chan who changed everything, where people had like a view on Patreon like, it's all right, but it's just this small thing. And then Sakimi-chan was like making a bunch of money, and then suddenly everyone's opinion changed to this like income focused thing of like, oh my god, this person made so much money and we should all do that too. And then it just kept moving slowly in this direction of like, it's not about community anymore. It's not about a bunch of people kind of all getting together, helping each other out. It was more like, how do I make myself popular? How do I break through?
That's sad.
Because even when we were doing like live streams on livestream.com back in the day, the people on the live streams, we're helping each other get jobs. Like, oh yeah, well here's an opening. Maybe you could get this. So it was like still people helping each other, as opposed to now where it's like everyone for themselves, and you have to be artist and marketer. Like you have to do both things really. It's like you have to kind of learn how to be a business person, promote yourself, find trending topics. Like everything's about algorithms and pleasing the algorithm. Whereas before it could have just been like, you make a cool piece of art, people like it, and people share it, and that's it.
Yeah, I miss those days.
Mm-hmm.
Someone asked a question earlier on, Cherika Sharp. She's asking, how do you overcome being hypercritical of your work? I thought that was a good question.
Yeah, it's tough. Do you have an answer for that?
I guess you don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the thing is, I am also struggling with this thought, because I think deep down, I think there is a bad side to being hypercritical of your work, but I think there's also a benefit to it, and that's why it's so hard to shake it. And I think so long as you're drawn to the positive you get out of being hypercritical, like you get a sense of control, you could get a sense of, I'm not letting my hubris like get the better of me. You can get.
But is that
just
hypercritical or just critical?
I think when you go into hypercritical, that is the case. Like you're getting some emotional benefit out of being hypercritical. Because I think when you're being critical of your work, it's when you're still in the healthy interval of the amount of negativity and positivity. And because being critical of your work also implies that you acknowledge its good sides. Like, okay, I did this hand well, but I messed up on the composition. So, okay, my anatomy's okay, but my design skills need work and stuff. That's being critical. But being hypercritical, the way I understand it, is this isn't good enough. It's like, okay, being hypercritical is that vague thing where you broaden your criticism of yourself so much that there's no rational thing to be gotten out of it. So you're only going for the emotions. Like, I need to feel better about myself. And I feel better about myself when I put myself down or when I put my work down, because either I feel like there's room for improvement, or I feel like I know what's best. I know where this is supposed to go, and I'll be damned if if I don't get there. Or, oh, I knew this was my place anyway. I knew I was never any good. I knew, like, there's some sort of heart pulling. It's not a mind thing necessarily.
There's a big problem with hypercriticalness, and that's that, okay, let's say you're dealing with facts, then you can make appropriate conclusions, right? Like, you have evidence, you have facts, but when we make work, like when the artist themselves makes the work, they've got tunnel vision. Because first of all, some of their mistakes, their mind has edited. So, like if you start drawing a picture and it's skewed, like it's sort of off, but you drew it the whole way, your mind sort of autocorrects. So you don't see it as skewed until you flip. That's why people recommend like flipping canvas and stuff. But so long as it's skewed and your mind is fixing it, you're not actually dealing with evidence, because you don't have the facts, because your mind is altering the facts. So let's say I'm really struggling with perspective, and then I'm doing an image and I've kind of improved in perspective a bit. For me, I'm going to be hyper focused on the perspective aspect, but someone else who looks at the image, maybe they're focusing on the gesture, the subject matter, the stories, other things, and they're not focused on the perspective. And for them, they don't really notice the perspective, because when perspective is good, you don't notice it. It's like bad perspective is what you notice, not good perspective. So then you're not seeing things accurately. So if you're hypercritical, but you're not seeing things accurately, how useful is that?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. But the thing is, I feel like when you're in a state of mind that you become hypercritical of your work, because because you're so emotional, you kind of can't analyze yourself well either. Like, can't analyze your hypercriticism, hypercriticalness. So I don't know. I don't know. I think the way out of it might not be necessarily rational. I think it's more like, what benefit do I get of this? And being honest with yourself, like, how am I feeling right now? I don't know. I just have this thought that most of the issues that we tend to hear about are emotional in nature, which is why reasoning out of them and just mental juggling doesn't really help as much as reassurance or I don't know, giving yourself permission to be you and things like that.
I think one of the things I try to do for myself with being critical, I don't know about hypercritical, but critical anyway, is to try to make it like it's not your work and you're criticizing someone else's work. So if you're hypercritical of yourself, you usually are involving your own feelings, like, oh, am I good, my self-worth, and all that comes into play. But if you just looked at someone else's work and they showed you their work, you'd probably be a lot more objective. You would look at what's working, what's not working. You kind of get to the point. You can see things much more clearly. So what I try to do is break out of the this is me and try to look at it as objectively as possible. And usually what that means is like take a break from the work. Don't think it's your work. So this requires a bit of mental gymnastics that I imagine like some people would struggle with the mental gymnastics involved. But don't think it's your own work. And then when you look at it, like sort of glance at it and then look away. So you're not taking it in as I did this, but you're sort of like, what was my first impression? What am I noticing? And then kind of trust that, like that snap decision, that snap judgment of like maybe, oh, the arm looked way too long. And then, okay, don't look at it for a bit and then look at it again and sort of like, okay, do I see that? So, I don't know. That's a way around it, I think, is to try to depersonalize as much as you can. So let's take some more questions. Stalker says, I think that nowadays with the internet, it has become much more accessible for anyone to learn how to draw. Yeah, definitely. It's like a good thing and a bad thing, because before there was a bunch of like ideas about stuff, theories, people talking, and things like, oh, you need talent if you want this, or you need whatever. And then it became sort of common knowledge. And then you also got to see people's development over time. The problem now, though, is there's way too much exposure to stuff. If you were constantly seeing other people's processes, it can give you a very biased view, I guess, of where you should be. And it's also very curated. I would say right now it's more curated than ever, where because it's so much about like appearances and you want to be picked up, you will be more likely to cheat to get that advantage. So like the amount of people who post sketchbooks that it's like, this is not a sketchbook. This is like, it's in pencil maybe, or it's a collection of drawings, but it's not like a sketchbook in the sense of a sketchbook used to be a thing you do to learn, to develop, to grow. It's often messy. It's often ugly. It's often like written. There's a lot of writing and only you can read it because it's your own writing or something. It's a lot more like personal, and about a thought process and development and thinking. But now it's like, this is a book of finished pencil sketches. Stuff like that, where it's like, this is not representative, but if you feel like you have to be at that level, it's very daunting, because then what do you do for your real sketchbook? I guess you would need 2 sketchbooks. One sketchbook where you allow yourself to fail and experiment, and one where it's like, well, now I've got to appear good. So, yeah.
Yeah, I don't envy that.
Yeah, it's just so easy to find, or to I guess to get the wrong opinion, especially when there's like stuff like making the algorithm happy, so everyone's kind of doing it because it feels like it's important to do. But then at the same time, it's like, because everyone's doing it, you're getting the wrong idea constantly. Like, you don't get the truth. You don't get to see, okay, this is what it's really like. You just get to see, okay, this is what everyone's doing, so this must be true. But it's like, not necessarily. Stalker says they would choose to be an artist in the early 2000s. Yeah.
It feels as though the algorithm really has become way too dominant.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, okay, it's dictating how people should be doing things. It's just like, okay, well, if you want to get noticed, you have to do the algorithm, but you can't really be yourself.
Willie says, hey, Sycra, long time no. Oh, hey, Willie. How are you doing? Cherika Sharp says, I like that answer. I want to be aware of what can be improved on, but not so stuck on it that I can't progress. Yeah, exactly. So if you can learn to separate yourself from the work and not be too critical, you're super critical, but you're not personal. I guess that's what it is, right? Like, being critical, but not taking it personally, not treating it like it affects your self-worth. I think that's like one of the biggest things, because failure is your best teacher. But if you include the ego into the equation, the ego doesn't like failure. The ego likes success. So it will prevent you from having the thing that will help you grow the most, which is failing. Failing, analyzing, learning, growing, not giving up. I would say not giving up is also extremely important. Like, there's so many artists who they weren't that good, but they just had to keep going. I think everyone is like that. Like, I'm pretty sure we've all been there where we just weren't good, and it took time to figure stuff out. Okay. Al Broom says, is there any specific tip sites you would recommend for friending other artists? Speaking of which, I have no friends that are artists to kind of learn from critiques, etc. What is it, Flavia?
Oh, wow.
That it just so happens that there is a Discord.
Yeah,
how convenient.
We got Discord. I guess Discords are like that now. Discords are the closest thing to forums. I know for myself, it seems my forum has not survived, which I suppose that's something. I don't even have access to my website. But anyway.
Well, most people from the forum have moved to the Discord, so if you think it as that, it did survive.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess Discord groups are good. It doesn't have to be mine. It can be any, but often, like, the thing is that if you find a patron, or if you're a patron of someone you like the work of and stuff, often you just pay like a little bit, get in their Discord, and then it's usually worth it, because you're around other people who also paid a little bit, and there's a huge difference between people who pay nothing and people who pay a little bit in terms of like seriousness and commitment to something. Where if it's a free-for-all, like let's say Reddit or 4chan or something like that, you get a lot of, like, you can get some good, but you also get a lot of bad to filter through. So I'm sort of changing my mind on closed environments, where I sort of feel like closed communities offer a little bit more. And I suppose that makes sense, because when I was learning, I also paid people to like study with them and stuff, and it did make a difference, because it's like, well, you're paying for a service and you're getting a service.
Yeah, I think I personally don't like the idea of a paywall, but I think in today's society, it's one of the few forms of vetting how much commitment there is on the other end, because you interact with so many people that you know so little, and the only show of like put your money where your mouth is literally put your money where your mouth, well, where you want your mouth to go. So I'm not a fan of the principle of like, oh yeah, pay to, because what if you don't? If you're just 14 and you're at
like,
home,
what if you
and
can't, you mean?
yeah, if you can't.
Yeah.
So that in that sense, but I feel like in that sense, it's not such an inhuman environment that if you were 14 or if you were like super young or unable and you did message a person like, hey, I can't afford this, but I would, can I support you in another way or something? Like, I don't think the dialogue has disappeared to that extent, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it has. I don't know.
Yeah, I think having skin in the game really matters.
Yeah.
And it's something, again, that there's so much now that's free and that doesn't have any cost. Like, it's too easy to get stuff because it's hard to appreciate it. Because I know for me, when I was learning how to do art from like one of my teachers, for instance, it was like I had to drive there, and it was annoying because it was like maybe 3.5 hours in the car. Like, it was 30 minutes there and then rush hour back, which was like 3 hours. It sucked. But it really, like, being in the car stuck in rush hour gave me time to think about what I had done in that session with him. And then it wasn't like, oh, I had a phone which had whatever social media stuff, so I couldn't just zone out and be exposed to other things. So having like a time where you put an investment in, and then you also have to do things the slow, hard way, it did make it sort of mean more. And I think a lot of the things that's missing right now are meaning. It's not so much information. I think we have tons of information, but we have a huge deficit of meaning, of purpose, of like, why are you doing this? When I ask, like, a lot of people will ask me, like, how do I get better at drawing? And then I asked, what do you want to do? And they have no answer. Like, that's bad. If you have no answer about what you want to do, yeah, it's really not a good thing to not have any clue what you want to do, because then it's like disconnected from your purpose. But I think purpose is the starting point. Like, well, I want to do this, and that's why I'm doing the other thing. Like, I want to make this type of image, and that's why I want to learn how to draw, as opposed to I want to learn how to draw because I don't know why. I don't know. I just want to. I want to get better. Why? So I can make good work and post on social media and get lots of followers. For what? It's always like keep asking the question, and if you're not getting an answer, it's a problem. You should be able to answer these things pretty quickly. And if it's hard for you to answer them quickly, means you haven't thought about it well enough. Like, you haven't taken the time to clarify the thoughts for yourself. Why am I doing this? What does this mean?
Hey, I'm back. So there's something I was wondering. I think it's very common for people to say that a reason for them to want to do art is because they want to impress other people. Do you think that's like an actual, like, legit reason, or do you think it's always something else, but it's just sort of like in the way, like the impress people is not a good end objective?
Yeah, I have like two opinions. One opinion is like the politically correct, nice opinion of, well, you know, if you really want to impress people, that's fine. You know, that's what you do. If that's what motivates you. And then I have my personal, people won't like me if I tell them that opinion, which is like, if you want to, like, that's the extent of what you want to do with your life, seriously, you just want to impress other people, like, isn't there more for you to offer than that? But then
But what do you do? But what do you do when their answer is like, "That's all I want because I've been deprived of this, or this is how I've been taught to base my worth on," or
then you got to learn
like,
new lessons.
but how are you going to learn new lessons if you're starting with such an emotional bias?
So first of all, I feel like the impress someone, if that really is where you're coming from, that shows you're missing something very important, very fundamental to development, which is,
Yeah.
you feel, well, you could probably explain it better than I can, so go ahead.
Well, I want to hear your viewpoint, and it's like,
well, it's not a
usually
good viewpoint, so explain your thing and then I'll clarify my thing.
So, the way I'm thinking about it, and I do apologize for being slow, everyone. I'm not feeling all that well, and I'm quite sluggish, and I've taken some painkillers, so that is probably affecting my clarity of thought. But when you start with such an emotional bias, I feel like the first thing you kind of do is be aware that your thoughts are going to have a bias. And I personally recommend writing stuff down, because it really does help with externalizing and sort of looking at your thoughts more objectively once they're on a page or on a screen, if you've typed them out. Like, the more distance you can give yourself from your bias, the more you can gain some advantage over it. But knowing, like, first and foremost, just knowing that you're not going to be objective about yourself is the first step. But I think that a lot of the times people look for rational explanations or rational methods, techniques, because they are reassuring, not necessarily because they want to learn that technique for something that they need, or that they can explain. I need some help here.
Okay, so yeah, I think that's true. Where it's kind of like, okay, you need to impress people because you want to feel good about yourself, because you're missing something and you're trying to get that thing. So it's like, well, if I'm impressed, then what? And there's usually a string of, I guess, this thought process sort of happens in a string. So for instance, I kind of had a similar thought process, and maybe I should just do that. I'll just talk about my own thing, because then it's like, whatever. Okay, it's not. I don't know. It's just more. I can be more honest about it. So, with my own thing, it was that I wanted to be a great artist. Why? Because I wanted. I thought if I was great, that would make it worth me existing. Why? Because I didn't think that there was much worth to my existence. Why? Because I didn't really get that reinforcement, and I used to feel like, I guess I didn't get enough love early on in my childhood, and so I had this idea of not being worth anything, and that if I'm good enough, then people would want me, then people would be interested in me. So I had this feeling of like, oh, I've got to be great. I can't just be average. Because if I'm average, there's no reason why someone would choose me over anyone else. And in my mind, I had already believed that, well, I'd always lose if it was just equal. So it can't be equal. I have to be so much better. And then there was also this idea of legacy, where if I'm good enough, if I'm great, if I'm truly great, then history will remember me. Okay, why do I want history to remember me? Because then it's like my existence was worthwhile. Okay, why do you feel you need history to remember you in order for you to feel like your existence was worth it? Because my life sucks so much, and if history doesn't remember it, what was the point? Like, what was the point of this shitty existence? So I was trying to do that with art. And then there was this feeling later, which was I didn't feel like I was impressive compared to my peers. And even with the YouTube thing, I ended up meeting like good artists who were way better than me. So then there was this inferiority and this feeling of like, I want to be good. Why? So I don't have to feel inferior to everyone around me. Okay. And what I eventually learned is that chasing all this stuff doesn't make you better. It doesn't make you a better artist. It just, in the end, the best art you can make is the art you make when you're really enjoying yourself, when you're expressing yourself honestly. That's the best art you can make. But that's not necessarily going to impress everyone. Some people may hate it. Maybe the best art you could possibly make is work that 90% of the world is not going to appreciate or enjoy. Okay, well, then what? And I realized that you make it for yourself. You don't do it for other people. You're not, if you try to live in order to impress other people, it's never going to work because you're not living for yourself. You're not in control of that. Someone else is in control of whether they're going to be impressed. And who cares? It doesn't even matter. It's you who matters. It's your ideas that matter. It's whether you are impressed or you're enjoying it that matters. And then the idea of, for myself, trying to make up for this missing thing, it was difficult because, again, I didn't feel like I was worth much. So then I needed to do this thing. Like, oh, I'm not good at anything. So I'm kind of good at art. So if I can do art well, then somehow that makes up for the things I'm missing. But it doesn't. When you're satisfied with yourself, you'll make better art. So, like, if you really want to make good art, care about yourself and care about your interests, and don't do it for other people. Do it for yourself. Be super selfish. Live up to your standard. Don't live up to other people's standards. If you're fine with some of your art and it's like, well, this is messy, but actually I had a lot of fun and I don't mind it. If I saw this art, I wouldn't be critical of it because it was messy, but damn, I kind of hate the colors. Why? Because they're not what I had in my mind. Okay. But then if other people are like, oh, I love the colors, but it's just way too messy. It's like, well, remember that doesn't matter to you. You like, or you don't like the colors, but you like the messiness. Go with that. Run with that. Run with what you like. You don't have to do what other people like. In fact, it's just, you're giving the world nothing of you if you do that. Like, if you try to live according to the standard of society, what you're giving the world is what they already see. So for instance, if there was like really popular art on Instagram, let's say, and everyone seems to like that work, and there's a bunch of artists doing that work. It's like, okay, so the art already exists, and the most you can do is saying like, oh, I wish I could do that, because then I would get whatever, the likes, the follows, the praise, but you're not giving anything of yourself, and you're not giving anything that doesn't exist. You're just putting more of what exists into the world. Whereas if you do what you really want to do, then you are putting yourself into the world. You're offering something that is unique because it's you. It's honest. So, I don't know.
I feel like there's an angle to this that is very, like, I don't know. I'm not trying to be contrarian about it or anything, but what if your goal is, like, what if the art is the means and the goal is to be accepted or loved or understood or included, or
I don't think it gets you that. I don't think you get that. Like, often being loved is a product of being weak. Like, people admire you for your qualities, but they love you for your faults, in a way. Like, there's a difference between love and admiration. I don't know. Maybe I didn't. I interrupted too soon. Whoa.
No. I'm just thinking of, if you're considering art an instrument to get something you want. Because if I consider art as an expression of my feelings, I also have to consider, who do I want to express my feelings to? What feelings do I want to express, and why? And what am I hoping for?
But you did the first step of considering your feelings. So you've already not been making art just to impress others. You've already decided that you're making art for yourself, doing what's important to you, and now you're considering who you...
But is it for myself, really? If, let's say, I was trying to impress, I don't know, someone from my early childhood who I never got the chance to impress at the time, and I want sort of like a remote an acceptance by proxy. If you accept my art, maybe you'll accept me as a person, or...
That sounds like what the kids these days call copium. It just sounds like you're... Okay, they don't accept you for you. That's it. It's over. They didn't accept you for you. I mean, they can learn to, but trying to bribe someone to like you, I don't think works well. I don't think it's a good strategy for life. Trying to, oh, if I give you this, if I show you this, then you'll like me. It's like, they should like you for you, and if they don't, that's a problem. Like, maybe you shouldn't be around people who don't like you for you, as opposed to trying to please them or impress them.
But a lot of the times it's in these internalized childhood experiences, right? So you can't really, they should this, therefore I can simply walk away from it. What do you do then?
What do you mean? Like, can you give an example of what you're referring to?
So let's say I was a dude, and I came from a family where I had a pretty big interest in art as a child, and I was drawing all the time, but my parents didn't accept me, and then growing up, I just want to impress them with my art so that I could show them that I am valid, I am a person.
Well, then you're trying to impress people who don't think you're valid. Why are they worth it? Like, why is it that you have to impress them to show them that you matter? You matter anyway.
But not to them.
And being good at art would make you like that changes anything. If they don't like you, why does it matter that you're good at art? Because if that worked for you, and okay, now they like you because you gave them art, isn't that the same as like, oh, this person's not my friend, but I made a lot of money and started giving them gifts and now they're my friend. It's like, they're not your friend. You have bribed them. You have given them something they wanted, and they are not accepting you as you are. They're just bribed. Like, you've just given them something for them, but not for you. This doesn't mean they like you. It just means you bribed them.
Yeah, I think I'm looking at some comments, and I think, for example, Stalker says, it seems to me that this person needs to go to a psychologist before grinding art. I think that's probably what I would agree with at that point. It just seems like it'll probably be a big issue that will affect almost everything that you would do, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, also related to this though, like, so you have that part, but then you also have this other part of art nowadays where it's like, oh, you want to get Instagram likes, because not just because more likes means more people like or are impressed by your work, but because it's almost like a reason, because, oh, I need to get these likes because I want to make money later with art. So it seems like a very bad, like, environment for someone who has that kind of thought.
Yeah. I think it's really hard because once you add getting money, it does change things. Like, there is a strategy to making money with art. There is a strategy that, yes, you may want to do this thing and this is what you want, and sure, let's say you want to be famous and you want to be popular. There are ways that will help you more than others. For instance, don't look at what I did. I'm terrible at that. But consider what, maybe that is a method. I just think that shouldn't be your only thing. And I also think that if people like you only because of that, that's a problem. Like, it's kind of like Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. Do you know the thing with that is that no one liked Rudolph until he was useful to them, and then they were like nice to him and they cared about him, then they liked him. I don't really like that. I feel like that's not a good. I guess it works to an extent in society, of like, until you are useful, we don't care about you, but it just seems pretty shitty.
Yeah.
Like, he had a very shiny nose. And if you saw it, you would even say it glows. But all of the other reindeer used to laugh and call him names. And they wouldn't let poor Rudolph join in any reindeer games. And it's like, okay, so he already had a shiny nose. It glowed. And nobody liked him. They just made fun of him. But then when Foggy Christmas Eve, Santa came to say, Rudolph, with your nose so bright, won't you guide my sleigh tonight? And then everyone liked him. So that's kind of like, people think you suck, and then you get popular because some big influencer was like, hey, man, you're really cool. And then everyone who liked that influencer is like, oh, shit, yeah, let's be your friend. Oh, we like you, actually. And this is supposed to be a good story? This is like a shit story. A poo story. Past YouTube censorship story. Say things in the right way story.
Yeah, I think it just says that, oh, see this thing, chasing acceptance based on some accidental thing that just you happen to do or be is like, it works, right? And then you're going to be happy. It's sort of selling
everyone's
you
gonna like you.
and then you're gonna, but that's the thing, because everyone's gonna like you, so they might. What if it works? What if you do your thing? What if
But it's not
like
just that, because he already had you have to remember, he had the nose that was shiny. It's only when Santa said, won't you guide my sleigh tonight, that they liked him.
Well, I don't know the story.
I told it to you. I told you the story just now. But yeah, it's like, not even that you're useful. It's like people don't even see your use, but when your use is pointed out, then you have worth. I think it's terrible.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
a pretty ruthless story.
It's saying, like, you aren't worth anything until someone who matters points you out and shows your worth. And then everyone's going to act like, oh, I knew all along. Yeah, we liked you to begin with. It's like, really? That's so crap.
But I wonder if people know that it's gonna be crap, because in the story, Rudolph becomes happy at the end, right? He's like, all right, I'm part of the gang now.
Actually, no. They don't specifically state that in the rhyme.
I think there's the rhyme, and then wasn't there some sort of like a TV show?
Yeah, there's
for
probably the
Christmas?
TV show. I'm sure he was happy at the end. Because
Yeah,
of course
it
it's
was
got to work.
Yeah, and then that's probably added to the popularity of the rhyme.
It is what they want you to think, though. That's a part of the marketing trick.
Yeah.
They tell you, like, yeah, but you should want this, and this is why. Anyway.
Yeah, because I think that if you're an aspiring Rudolph, the joke at the end is that, oh, you're not even gonna be happy about it. You're gonna have that, oh, this is fake feeling.
Isn't Naruto kind of like this as well, where he's rejected by the village, and then he wants to become Hokage because
Yeah, exactly. He's Rudolph. Uzumaki Rudolph. Because it is that thing of... But they do point that out as a thing throughout the... I mean, spoilers, but they do sort of address it.
They acknowledge the flaw of that in Naruto.
Kind of. They acknowledge the existence of that, where people only like you because you're useful to them. But then there is a case to be made for the sad reality of life, where, yes, that's how life works. If you're useful to people, they will like you. And then you have to argue with, like, is that true? And kind of, it is true. It is true that people like things that are useful to them. And, oh, that upsets your idea of the world should be kind and people should like each other for their inherent qualities. I guess I could do a counterpoint to my own thing about why actually that is the way the world works, and you're delusional if you think it doesn't.
Go ahead. I'm curious.
Yeah.
Well, what do you expect, Rudolph? You expect people to see your worth, even though they have no reason to see how worthwhile you are. You're different. What is difference in nature? Well, there's a thing of being, like, accepted within the herd. You want to be like everyone else so that you will blend in, so you will not be perceived as different. And sometimes being different's a useful thing, but you can't expect people to see your difference. You can't expect to have it where, okay, I'm different and people will see my worth. No, they won't. In fact, because you're different, you have to pay the price extra. Like, you have to pay extra. So you have to be disliked for your positive quality because people don't understand it. But then the trade-off is when you are accepted finally, then people will be on your side. So it's just that's life. That's how it goes. If people find you useful, they'll like you. If they don't find you useful, they won't like you. Get over it, Rudolph. But I don't think Rudolph really had the problem. I think I had the problem. Get over it, Sycra. I don't like how they treat you, Rudolph. You can't be hanging out with them. No, I want the friends who are reindeer. You're not a reindeer. I don't want friends like you. Then you bloody go to them. See what happens to you. You think they're your friends? They're your friends because your nose is bright. But you know, it won't last forever. Rudolph, it never lasts. It's going to be over, and then you will realize they didn't like you to begin with. You know why? Santa bought headlights for his sleigh. Xeon headlights. Very powerful. Now what about you? Can you compete? You can't. You see? All right. Do we have any other questions?
Yeah, here I have one. Tank says, would really like to hear you guys discuss the two worlds of quote study art and quote appealing art.
Study art and appealing art. What does that can Tank, can you explain a bit more about what you mean? Like, I'm curious, but I don't know exactly what you are referring to.
Here there's another comment from Tank saying, learning how to be an illustrator after spending the last 10 years learning fundamentals is a tough barrier to cross.
So, yeah, you mean how in fundamentals we don't really focus on like story or concept, but that's really important? Is that it? Again, I'm a little bit confused.
He also says, I feel like many artists spend their entire life studying art but never learning how to make their stuff appealing.
Oh, so it's fundamentals versus appeal?
Oh, okay. I think I get it now. Like, yeah, you know proportions and perspective, but it's much better to just have appeal because people respond to appeal so well. That's true. That's absolutely the case. That, like, there was a Neil deGrasse Tyson saying where he was talking about how he talked to James Cameron about, I think it was Titanic, how he told James Cameron that the sky in Titanic would have been wrong because the stars were in the wrong place or something, and James Cameron replied with like how much money Titanic made and how much more money and asked how much more money would it have made him if he got the stars in the right place. And that's kind of, and the reality is like, well, it wouldn't have made extra money if the stars were in the right place. And that's kind of the same with fundamentals, where especially with things like anatomy or perspective, often you'll get people saying like, your image is bad because the perspective is off, if you're in like art circles. But most people won't notice and they won't care. Like, look at Dragon Ball. Does that have good anatomy? I would say, especially early on, no. But it still became extremely popular. There's a bunch of things that are not, proper. It's also like you could imagine musicians criticizing, like classical musicians criticizing maybe pop musicians about like, well, you played this wrong and there's wrong notes and you're not doing a great job. It's like, people like it and they pay to see my concerts and they don't pay to see yours, Like there's a bit of that in it as well, where it's appeal is really what most people respond to, and story and appeal. If it looks cool, if it looks good, it's fine. And this is something not to be underestimated, because it happens in colors as well, where if you have nice colors, people will care. That's like, most people will be attracted to the work because they like the colors, or doesn't matter that the anatomy is a bit off. Where it does matter is in specific jobs, like in an industrial design, you need to know perspective. But most likely you're going to be using 3D anyway. So I guess you don't need to know perspective that well, because you can just rely on the 3D program. But appeal is what people really care about. And the people who spend their time learning fundamentals, and they often get technically good but stiff. And the people that draw what they like, they get work that's appealing, but eventually it does improve in the fundamentals usually as well. Might take them a bit longer, but hey, they've got art that people actually want to see. So
Yeah, I feel like part of that is also the whole practice trap, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so if you haven't watched that video from Sycra, you can look that up. It explains a lot about that, I think.
Yeah, I think that was the gist of that video.
Okay, here's another question from Team Player 2412. I kind of want to ask, how do I slow myself down when drawing? Any practices I should try? I end up sketching too fast for my own good sometimes.
There's a few ways you can do this. One way is to breathe more, draw more slowly. There's also the question of like too fast. Is that a problem? So what I do to get over this is I also draw very fast in the beginning. And I feel like if I draw slowly, I lose all the energy. So what I do is I draw very quickly, and then I put that on the bottom layer, and I lower the opacity or change the color, and then draw over it. So each time I'm slowing down, but I'm not losing the energy because the energy exists underneath. And if I do lose the energy, I'll like delete that layer and redo I'll delete the top layer where I started to lose it, or I'll like look at it and like analyze, why did I lose this energy, and then I'll try to capture it back. So that can help you slow down. Another thing is to change your medium. So if you do oil painting or watercolor, you can't go too fast. You'll mess up so badly that it'll force you to slow down and be more methodical. But I also don't think it's absolutely necessary that you learn to slow down. You could just change your process to incorporate that. So, you do your fast part first, get all the energy, get all the gestures, but don't try to work on anatomy. Don't try to work on perspective. Don't sort of roughly get your perspective, but don't obsess over all those details. Then make a new layer and then try to solve each one of those problems in the subsequent layers, so that you've got you will slow down just because you're dealing with more, I guess, how can I put it, more technical aspects. So you're using more of your left brain, I guess. Yeah. Okay.
So here's a question related to what we were talking before this one. It's from Elcard. Says, I feel like I'm wasting time when I'm not doing quote quote study art. Starting to work on something feels very unproductive because it feels like I'm not good enough.
Yeah. You're not going to be good enough. That's fine. It's okay to be not good enough. Analyze it one piece at a time. So, okay. So do work that you think you're not good enough at, right? You feel like you should be studying fundies. Instead, don't. Do the work you're not good enough to do. And then, don't post it. Don't show everyone. Just ask yourself, okay, what's one thing that would, what are the problems I see? And then pick one of those problems and solve that problem. So maybe it's the shapes aren't very good. Okay, focus on that. What are good shapes? Do you know what good shapes are? If the answer is no, who whose art has good shapes that you can think of. Find that person, find that art, look at it. What do they have that you don't have? What are they doing you're not doing? Figure that out. Get it so you now, like, fix your image until you now have good shapes. Okay, so now your work is not good enough, but at least the shapes are good. What else? Well, I don't understand the next thing. I don't understand that, like, oh, maybe you put clothing in, but you don't understand the folds. They don't really make sense. Okay, figure that out. But when you're figuring it out, you're putting it into that initial image that you did care about, or that initial project you did care about, and you're fixing it. So you're not doing studies, like random studies. You're doing specific studies to solve a problem. It's very practical. It's very useful. And you are becoming less and less not good enough. Because you can start with being not good enough. It's like, sure, we all start with being not good enough. But just doing fundamentals isn't necessarily the answer to getting better. It's like, because if you do things out of context, what happens is they can abstract and they can take a life of their own. So for instance, I might say, I don't understand perspective. Okay, you don't understand perspective, but perspective, you could spend a lifetime studying perspective, or at least many, many years studying perspective. So when do you know you're good enough? Well, if the answer is detached from a project, it's very hard to know. You could just keep spinning your wheels doing stuff and not getting that answer. But if you have a project and it's like something specific, like, well, these buildings need to be in perspective, then you're done once the buildings are in perspective and you move on. And you've gained a bit of knowledge, you've applied that knowledge. It's now a different kind of knowledge because you've applied it. You'll remember it more. And then you can apply it to future things and everything's good. You're improving as you go. You're making a lot of progress. You're improving because you're dealing with specific problems and not this like abstract, I am not good at such and such fundamental. Because the reason the fundamentals are the fundamentals is because in every image they exist. So let's look at this image, for instance, that this one, right? Okay, there is perspective, there is composition, there is like the anatomy is like, mild, some weird anatomy, but there is some anatomy. The way, for instance, this plate is smaller than this plate. It's got a lot of issues with it in terms of like, are the fundamentals perfect? No. But they're being applied, like the concepts are being applied. So they're going to be in all of your images anyway. So you got to make the image, because otherwise you're applying it to nothing, to something that's like, it's just concepts. You're just dealing with concepts outside of things. And I think when people like, this isn't just true for art, it's true for pretty much everything. When people talk about conceptual stuff outside of practical stuff, they run into problems. You get into like theoretical ideas, but not necessarily practical ideas that you deal with the problem and you move on. You deal with the problem and you move on. So I think it's much better personally to work on your project, but fix all the things that aren't good enough. Yes, you start not good enough. You get good enough by solving the problems. Okay.
Yeah, I feel like, at least in my situation, when it comes to that, my experience is that a lot of the times you have to notice how you feel when, say, you draw something and it's not as good as you think it should be. I think you have to like remove yourself from that like bad feeling that you're not good enough or whatever, and look at it like as like a problem that you have to solve, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, if you can make things specific problems instead of like ideas, it's so much easier to solve them. Because you're working with something as opposed to just some random idea. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Another question from Yofo Dragon. I have a question. How come when someone discredits an endeavor, the reason is often because it didn't make them happy when it concluded? Is happiness or fulfillment always the only end goal?
No. Fulfillment maybe, but happiness doesn't have to be the end goal. But it's a good thing to fuel you. There's no rules, like, even with the thing where I was giving the counterpoint for Rudolph, there's always another viewpoint. There's always a reason why whatever you think, possibly the opposite also applies and makes sense and is viable. And then it's up to you. Like, it's personal responsibility that is... it's important to have that too.
Okay. Question from DeMarcus Mooney. Do you believe that at a certain level of popularity and influence, artists have a responsibility to represent all different kinds of cultures, ethnicities, and beliefs in their work?
What do you think? What do you think about this one?
I don't think they need. I don't think there is a responsibility. I think they just draw whatever they like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think anyone can be held to be like, you must do this because it is your social obligation. I always feel like in the situations where someone is being held to that standard, I always feel like it's for the person who's complaining to make that work themselves. So for instance, if you don't feel like your particular group is represented, that's a reason for you to make that art. Like, you bring it into, like, that's how I think about it. It's my job to bring it into existence if other people don't see it. So for instance, facial features, like, I have like a nose that is more like this shape, and it's not really an anime type nose. Although I think there's like one chick in Attack on Titan who does have this type of nose. But the point is, I do that in my work. I have my characters with those types of noses because it's for me to do. It's my job to bring that into that world. But for me to tell someone else, like, hey, you're not representing me, you should be doing this, I don't feel like I have that right to ask anyone else to do that. I can point it out to them. Like, I can say, it's kind of annoying that there's no representation for people with my features or people with my skin color or something. And I think that's valid, and you can express that for sure. But you can't demand someone appeal to you. And it's also one of the reasons why we do create, because our viewpoint is not necessarily represented, because it's not so simple or it's not easy to find what we like. That's a reason to make stuff. It's like, well, I want to see stuff in this world that doesn't exist. Okay, what are you going to do about it? I'm going to make it so that I can see it, so I can enjoy it. And then other people can also see it. And then if they see what I see, it might get promoted more. Like, maybe people will see, hey, you draw this nose and I like the way that looks, and I'm going to incorporate that too. So it's coming from a good place, but I don't think we have a ethical or moral obligation, because I think when you get into that, what you're really saying is it's okay for someone to tell someone else what they think or what they should do, how they should express themselves. And that has a lot more dire consequences if you get into that territory. It's like, what world are you heading in where thoughts or your own creativity needs to be approved by what, society? Really? That sucks. That's a shitty society, or a poopy. That's a poopy society.
Yeah, I was actually, while you were talking, I was thinking a little bit more about it, and it's like, it feels like if it's just like me, like I'm drawing something, I feel like it wouldn't make sense, I guess. But if you think about, I don't know, like the most popular movie or TV show in the world, where it's a huge group of people who are making it, is that a different, like,
Oh,
does
yeah.
that make a difference?
I think so. Because, first of all, if you're doing a thing that's very big, it's not just your idea. So I think you're coming from a different perspective then. Where is it your vision? Is it a single? Because if it's a single vision, I think it should be approached in that way. But if it's not, I think everything you say is sort of commentary, and that you have to take responsibility for that. So exclusion is also a way of... I don't think you need to change things necessarily, but I do think what you say has consequences. I just don't think people can tell you what you should do. Actually, I'm not sure. What do you guys think? Because I'm starting to think, like, no, even if it's a big project, you should be able to say whatever you want. Because if people don't like it, they just don't have to support it, you know? Like, let's say you made a huge movie and you excluded a certain amount of people from it. Do you have, like, let's say you have no Asian people in your movie because you just don't like Asian people. And then people become aware of that. Well, maybe it wasn't because you don't like it. Maybe it was just an oversight, in which case it's probably good that people pointed out, you know, like, hey, did you know this kind of not representative? Or this doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But again, I don't think you can force people to do that.
But even so, if you're thinking about that example, what kind of story are you telling with your movie? And would this ruin what you're trying to say? Because if, for example, you're making a movie about life in Romania, but you have everyone sort of...
True.
It's very like, okay, was this an omission, or was this in service of what you're trying to set as a context? Because yes, there are more cosmopolitan places, but generally the people you're going to see are going to be of a certain type.
Yeah, true. Yeah, it's kind of like, or if something's an existing property, like I know with The Witcher, they made changes to the
Netflix show
thing, but it was like, to me, part of The Witcher was that it was very Polish in culture. So it felt like it's fine to keep everything sort of Polish. And there's not a lot of, especially because it was like sort of based on Polish stuff in a certain time period where there wouldn't be a lot of races that are like participating. But then at the same time, I don't think you can't make changes, but I do think like this kind of has its own world that's been built, and I think the solution is not necessarily to change what's existing to suit your narrative or to suit the way the world is. I don't think we should change what, like, okay, it happened to be in this period and we're gonna change it. I think you should just make new stuff. Like, I agree that there is not good representation of different cultures and races and stuff. I totally agree with that. But that's like, yes, and that's one of my jobs, is to put that into the world. Like, I take personal responsibility to, I guess, like, do your part, make new things, convince people with the quality of your ideas that to make them kind of on your side as opposed to telling them what to do. I just think it's a bad idea usually to tell people you need to do this, because they're just going to resent you at the end, or and I think quality is quality. So if you do something, at least make sure the quality is good, and you're not making a change that gets rid of like world building for the sake of like political correctness, because then you've kind of done something at the expense of the story being better in a way, or more honest.
Yeah. Another thing about the Netflix Witcher show is that pretty much the writers really did not respect the source material.
Yeah.
They did not like The Witcher, so a lot of the change, not only did they insert a lot of their own views, they were doing it not necessarily out of respect for the source material. It got to the point where Henry Cavill, who was a big fan of the Witcher universe, he basically had to quit because he couldn't stand.
Yeah, I think that's terrible. Basically. Like, presiding over a franchise that you don't even like, that's stupid. Just go make your own thing. Why do you have to do that? In terms of like, does fantasy need to be historically accurate? Of course not. But is the thing made already? Like, Lord of the Rings is like talking about Middle Earth, but everyone's kind of European. Like, oh, the dwarves are sort of Scottish, I guess. And it's like, it's not really going too far out of that culture. So it's like, yes, but that's made. Like, it was made at a time for an audience with these things. Do you have to change it? It feels like the big thing is that some people had ideas that people liked in the past. So maybe Tolkien or whatever. And then people are treating it like, we have no good ideas. We can't come up with anything original. So we have to change your thing because at least you had some things that worked. And because we're so bad at coming up with ideas or worlds or things like that, we have to borrow your thing and then we're going to adapt it. It's like, that's not very creative. I think it would be better if you could be making your own stuff. I want to make my own story. I want to make my own worlds. And I want them to be diverse because that's what I see in the world around me. And it's interesting to me. Why does everything have to be, we're taking this existing franchise and changing it? It's like, make your own thing. No, because there's already an audience here and we want to market to them. It's like, so if there's already an audience and you're just doing this to make money, isn't the dumbest thing you could do changing it? Wouldn't it just be like, your job is to be as faithful as possible to the source material so that the fans get what they wanted?
Unless you think you know better.
Well, yeah, you think you know better. What's your point? Like, okay, you know better. What's your argument?
I think the issue is probably that these people, they want to make money, right? They're like, yeah, this franchise or idea is really good. There's a lot of people, we want to make money, but they're not necessarily like super into it, like the people in charge. So that then you have a bunch of other people who are like, oh yeah, they pretend like they're super into the franchise to get the job, but they're actually not. And so it just becomes a money issue, I think.
Yeah, you get people who they're not actually attached, but they view it as a stepping stone to their career. Like, oh, I'm gonna be a director because I worked on this thing that's very big, and it's big, and there's gonna be a big budget behind it because it's popular, because someone who made an appealing world to some people, let's piggyback off their success. but that should not be allowed. Like, that's the thing. It's like, yes, there's a motive to do that. There's a motive for theft. There's a motive for a lot of things that aren't necessarily good. If you just wanted to make money, I guarantee you, if you had a TV show, or a movie, not a movie, like a TV show, where it was kind of like Lost, or one of those, or those like shows where people are put on an island, but people actually died in it, I bet you, first of all, I wouldn't watch it, but I bet you a bunch of people would. It would be super popular. It would make a lot of money. Why? Because it's got high stakes drama. It's kind of like, yes, that doesn't mean you necessarily go with it just because it makes money. I think people really need to examine what is the cost of making money. I think it's become way too permitted in our society to have it makes money as a reason for why something should be justified. I don't think that should be the reason. Like, I think there should be more than just it makes money as a justification for its existence. But I also think putting your own social values out there should be done for your own work. Like, not for someone else's work. Make your thing. Make your case. Make your show that you like, that will, you think, appeal to people. And if it doesn't, ask yourself, why did this not work? Did I sacrifice good storytelling for my political agenda? If the case is yes, probably don't do that. You know, think about story, value story, respect story. Story is important. Like, think about more important things than just, oh, we're pushing a social narrative because if we don't, then what? I do think there is a case to be made for promoting, you know, kind of like in the original series of Star Trek, they had the first interracial kiss. Was that important? Yes. But it wasn't changing something. It wasn't like, we're doing Romeo and Juliet, but instead, Romeo's going to be black and Juliet's going to be white, and we're going to force the first interracial kiss. It's like, no. They made it in their own thing. It's part of the canon. The fans have no problem with it because it's part of the canon, right? Like, this is fine. This is good, respecting your audience, doing storytelling. You can have your agenda. You can have your political ideas. You don't need to diminish something that exists or change something that exists to get that across. Or at least I don't think so. I think you should just make your own thing. When people are complaining, like, for instance, if people say, you know, there's not enough women in video game studios. I don't like this idea from the point of we need to have a quota. It's like, no, I don't think it's right, for instance, that there aren't enough women in video games or something. But why don't more women just make their own studio if that's a problem? Like, why not make your thing instead of taking someone else's thing and changing it? If they're assholes, they're assholes. Whatever. Do your own thing. Make your own thing. Have faith in yourself. Trust that you can do it. And you'll probably have to learn a bunch of lessons. Like, oh, this is actually harder we have to focus a lot on gameplay, and we never thought about this because we're just thinking about social aspects. And like, yeah, making a game is hard. It takes a lot of work to do stuff. But do it yourself, as opposed to don't let someone else dictate what you should have, but don't change someone else's things either, right? Like, make your thing. That's how I think. Anyone else want to talk, or am I just gonna dig my own grave? I always worry.
Let me get another shovel. Help you dig it further.
Well, I think I guess the argument here is that the people who are more likely to be in a position to be able to make these things maybe are not those people that they want more inclusive, to be like more included.
So what does that mean, though? That means that someone worked really hard to get to a position where they had a position of authority, right? They had to do a bunch of stuff to make that happen. So let's say it was a male-dominated thing and you wanted more females in it. First of all, just hire whoever's good. Like, don't have names on the resumes, don't have age, don't have gender. Just pick people for what their work is, for their merits. I feel like that would be a solution. But let's say that's not the case. And there's like a bunch of men and they didn't want women in their environment. But they made a studio that's so big and so successful that now it's like, well, if they promoted women, it would be a big help. But yeah, they worked really hard to make their shitty thing that you dislike. Make your own thing. Oh, but that's really hard. No shit. No poop. It's really hard. Yes, that's why you have to do it. Like, with my comic, I'm constantly like, oh, it's not good enough and I need to do this and I need to learn this. Yes, because if I don't, then it won't be what I want. It's hard. It takes work. Maybe it takes a bunch of people a long time, maybe a decade, to build a studio that is as good and is inclusive or even women focused or whatever. It's like, but you've worked for it. Don't piggyback off someone else's work. Like, taking Tolkien's thing is basically, here's a person that made their world, they made their ideas, and now you're changing it. If you're smart enough to change his ideas, why not just make your own thing? Like, if you're good enough to. Like, Breaking Bad is awesome because it's new. It wasn't like, hey, we had to change someone else's story to make our good story. It's not like, hey, let's not make Breaking Bad, let's make Spider-Man, or let's make, I don't know, a new Wizard of Oz, and we're gonna make it all edgy and stuff. It's like, just make your own thing, make your own story.
Yeah, I feel like there's like a lot more into this. I don't know if you want to continue since it's.
Oh yeah,
like
we're pretty much we're done. We're done. I'm curious what people make of these streams. You know, are you fine with us talking about unrelated topics, more topical issues, more political or whatever type of issues, or should we stick to art more? Do you have questions and stuff? I am curious because sometimes I'm lately wondering, like, do people like these streams? Are these, I mean, the ones who are here, I take it, like it, and I'm very glad for that. But curious, you know, are there reasons people might tune out, or there are things they don't really want to hear, or is it getting too repetitive or anything like that? So yeah, I'd really appreciate it to know what you think. So with that said, I want to go ahead and thank our guests, Bob Meatbag, Flavia, Sam, and Dekru. And thank you to all of you folks who joined live and those people who are watching the recording. Yeah, it was great to see you. And we'll see, you know. I guess I plan to do it next week, but we'll see how it goes. I hope this helped. Thanks for watching. Wait, that's not the end of the stream one. Just bye, I guess, is good.